Hello everyone, my name is Paul. I'm coming to you today from Jamestown, North Dakota. Cold winter time, February 3rd I think. We got some wildlife out here, little bunnies, deer. This is my shop. This morning it was 24 below and it's only 8 below right now. So interestingly, I don't know if you can see that, but when it gets really, really cold, the ground freezes enough to where it cracks. But the purpose of this video is to kind of pay back a little bit to some of the people that have been kind enough to help me with my Ducati project. This is born in November of '65, and it's a 1966 model because it had different front and rear rim sizes. It was only one of 30 exported from Italy into the United States that year, and I was lucky enough to come across it fairly locally. This is my wall of inspiration, and there is what this bike looked like to begin with, sitting in the weeds out behind a guy's home. These are, as I said, kind of my inspiration pictures. I got to turn the furnace down here so it don't kick on and make too much noise, but you know, it's motivating to see the quality of work that other people have done, and you know, help kind of move me in the direction of where I want to go. You know, there's so many things that I've learned along the way, and I oftentimes turn to YouTube to see what I can find there, and there's some helpful stuff there, but not a lot. So I thought I'd share some of the stuff that I've learned. On Facebook, there are a variety of Ducati groups that are tremendously valuable. I was fortunate enough to develop a friendship with a gentleman in Indianapolis who has been unbelievably helpful, and we converse almost daily. In the evening we chat back and forth, and it's fun to hear of all his adventures and experiences, and he's been very helpful. Well, let me just get started here. The engine is over here. It has been all cleaned, new bearings. The cylinder head and the jug are at Sid's Cycles in Florida getting worked on, and the crank is with Crankworks in Tempe, Arizona, also being worked on. And this is the collection of miscellaneous parts, clear coat, electrical stuff, gears, you name it, lots of stuff. My wife is always humored by the number of packages that arrive. So let's just start talking a little bit about what we see here. It's a 250. I don't know if I mentioned that. I had to put new rims, new spokes, new tires on it. The rims had been rusted completely through. The new fork tubes, that was one of the largest challenges that I had. The old one side would move, the other side wouldn't. And it ended up that one of the tubes was bent. You know, here you see it cut in half. But the other one is moderately good. It was quite a process to get that taken care of. I'll insert a photo of the setup that I had of heating it. And cooling it at the same time, trying to get a temperature differential enough for the weight to pull it loose, and it finally came apart. There's three things on these bikes that are really hard to come by. And one of them is front fenders, because as you know, when we were younger and we'd get a dirt bike, you know, the front fender had to go. It just didn't look cool. This one fortunately had the original front fender, but it was mounted in a fashion that I didn't like. It was mounted up here underneath the triple tree area, and it just wasn't what I wanted. So I came across this bracket, I riveted it on, I made these struts. I also made this kind of a fork brace top bracket. You see I don't have the screws set to the right length yet, but I was fortunate enough to have that front fender. The other thing is the seat. So this is the seat that is finished. It's been reupholstered, and the welding on the pan has been done and primed and painted and reinforced, and I even added a support here with a rubber bushing to keep it from flexing, so it's a little bit stronger. This is the pan that was on the motorcycle when I got it. I entertained rebuilding it because you could still get the shape and the contour, but it would have been a lot of work. And like I said, fortunately I was able to find one from a gentleman in the California area that sent it to me, and it worked. And of course the other is the gas tank. This is one that I bought locally, very surprisingly. I come to find out a gentleman in town who we always thought was kind of an oddball had a collection of rare motorcycles. And I got a tank, the headlight, which is over here in primer, and it even had a Ducati speedometer, not functioning at this point, but nonetheless something I can put together to make work. And just looking around here, the battery compartment, I made a little cubby underneath here that's accessible when the seat's off. On the other side is where the key will go. It'll allow me to put a flasher module in there. I do have turn signals, relays, some electrical stuff, that kind of thing. And I just stuck this on here just because I was finally to a point where I could kind of mock it up and make it look like a motorcycle. You see the rear shocks are gone. I got a package in the mail today from Italy, and that'll be something that I work on next, is putting the rear shocks and rebuilding those. So some of the other resources that have been very helpful are these books. Ducati Owner's Workshop, and this one here is almost a mirror of that. So these two are somewhat the same, but this one here has been probably the most helpful because it has part numbers in it, and along with eBay. Here, for example, is a breakdown of the carburetor, and you can see if you have a question about an O-ring or a small part or a slider or whatever. If you study this enough, you will be able to figure it out. I had to buy a rebuild kit. Some pieces were missing. You know, here you see an excerpt of an order that I had, a bunch of part numbers, but if you get a hold of one of these, this is a 68, and maybe I didn't know at the time, but they had a version that goes back a little bit earlier to the 68 era that this bike is in. So just kind of walking around here, this is just a little spacer for the seat, but I do have LED turn signals incorporated into the back. This bracketry, this rear taillight, came off a Yamaha motorcycle. It's not a Ducati, but it's a pretty good representation of what it looked like. It fits well. You know, I got a hole in the fender here. It'll route the wires up underneath and go to my junction box. I don't know what to make of this gas tank. All the little dings and dents in it are on the right-hand side and none on the left side. And, you know, I think it had something to do with dirt track racers like to turn left but not right. And it looks like if you turn right, you get accidents. But those are easily repairable. I'm not going to put the factory style logo on here. I'm going to put just Ducati. It's going to be red. And so we're going to do red fenders, red tank, chain guard. The top, the headlight covers, the headlight will all be red. The handlebars were a little bit bent up, so I got new controls and stuff up there. I just got done with the front forks, the springs, the kit inside here, a new valve assembly. This was quite a project. The foot pegs, the serrated mating here was totally trash on the original bike, and my friend in Indianapolis helped me source these serrated washers, so I replaced this tube with a heavy-duty tube, and I welded in new serrated washers to the end of the tube and to the end of the foot peg, and a new center shaft. This had been kind of repaired in a poor manner with a piece of angle iron, and so it's should be strong now. This is where my ignition key will go, the battery, the wires from the turn signal or from the rear brake will come out here and go into that. One of the other things you'll notice is I have it up in the air. I have some sawhorses. You know, I'm almost 70 years old and I'm not a real fan of crawling around on the floor anymore, so this works out good. When I get to do the wiring, we're probably going to either put it on the ground or make it a little bit lower. So earlier we talked about some of the magazines that are really helpful, but here's some products that have been very, very helpful. First of all, disassembling of a 53-year-old motorcycle. The piston was stuck, bolts are stuck, sometimes they break off. Surprisingly, a lot of them came out pretty well, but I had Marvel Mystery Oil, and it's just because that's what I had, and I put about a cup of that in the cylinder head, and I'll just let it sit. And I moved on to other things, and it sat for about a month. And then I made a wooden structure to get it set up so I could pound on it with a wooden block. Didn't want to break anything. My motto is you break something, it's going to cost you a lot of money. And lo and behold, it came loose. But I did buy new piston rings, a new liner, etc., etc. So this works. There's lots of different concoctions that'll work. This has probably been my best discovery. I bought this at Napa. It is a freeze lubricant. You heat something up, and I've learned that heat is your friend. I have a infrared gauge here. You know, you heat things up with a normal propane thing and you might get close to 200. Well, that's not hot enough. You got to get up in the 300 range to be helpful. And then if you can douse the stuck item, for example a bolt, with this super freeze, you'll get hot expansion, cold contraction. Hopefully it'll break that bond and you can get it apart. Seafoam is another option. You'll see that I've polished a few things. Some look better than others. but these are some of the products that I use for that. Polishing compound, buffing compound. This Never Dull and Wizards metal is a fun product. It's kind of a, you know, just like everybody with YouTube, you hold the camera with one hand and you can't open it, but it's a woven fabric that kind of like steel wool in a way. You tear apart and you can buff things up pretty good. These looked really bad to begin with, but they look pretty good now. So well, this again, this is my shop. It's just a stall and a half garage. You can see I have clutter or I have one of everything if you want to look at it that way. Tools, some of the paint products I'm using, Duplicolor primer and paint, and then I have the 2K clear gloss that I'll put over it. I did use an implement paint on the frame, and it turned out fine. I brushed on the primer, which was a mistake. I should have used spray, because brushing it on, it doesn't get really smooth. So I sanded for a long time to get it reasonably decent, and it looks good. I mean, the areas that you see, you know, they look pretty nice. Another trick is to tag things, because when you disassemble something, you always say, well, I can remember where that goes, but you can't. So I bought these from Office Depot, and they're basically just tags with a little metal wire on it, and you know, you can write down a good description, and hopefully that'll help you, along with taking lots of pictures. Take pictures, because you can always go back to them and it'll help you figure out how to put something back together again. Being an older person, like I said, I'm 68, you start to sense the value of safety related things. I have hearing protection. I'm deaf in my right ear now because of all the stupid stuff I did throughout my life. And eye protection, respirator, dust mask, sanding, grinding, you make a mess. It's kind of nice to have a shop when it's like 10 below out right now, and I can come in here, and with my furnace, you know, I can keep it 72, whatever temperature I want, and I'm real comfortable, and this is just where I hang out. Well, let's see, what else? I did end up buying a 100cc Ducati from this estate in town, and I parceled out a bunch of stuff on eBay, which is your best source. I did get a tank. The original tank had a terrible long rust hole in one side. It looks pretty good here, but on this side it's definitely a disaster. I thought I could save it, and I could have, but there was no point going through all that work when I could find one. You know, that leads me a little bit to talk about cost. Restoring a 50-some-year-old motorcycle of this vintage is not inexpensive. For example, that seat with the pan and shipping and the work I did to it and the material and the upholstery is right around $600. And never would I have thought I would have had a $600 seat on this motorcycle when I started. The gas tank, I think I paid $50 for, which was a bargain. The fork tubes in the front here, they were $460 for the pair, and they had to come from Italy. Oddly enough, there was a 35 thousandths difference between one side and the other in the snap groove depth, and the proportioning valve wouldn't fit in. So I thought, well, did I get the wrong one? Well, I ended up confirming that with my friend that I can just alter it, and I did. So all right, I think what we're going to do is we're going to open up this box, take a peek what we have, and we'll continue on with that.